So we're going to use the podium here. So good morning, welcome, thank you very much for coming. This is our forum on gun violence in the schools. And I feel very good about doing this. I think this is an important topic for discussion. All are welcome and encouraged. I really especially encouraged young people to come. I was hoping that Kevin would pass the word for junior and senior high students to be aware of and to come. So we'll talk about whether or not there is a problem with violence in the schools. I think we'll all pretty much agree that there is, although I do also know that schools are one of the safest places to be. So I mean, there are both of those dynamics taking place. I'll talk about active shooter responses. I have a 6-minute video I would like to show for Ohio State University, Run, Hide, Fight. I think it's very worthwhile watching. Then Andy Simon will review some laws pertaining to weapons and violence in the schools. And Andy's gonna talk about whatever he feels comfortable saying and talking about and adding personal comments. Then Pastor Michelle will discuss ELCA guidance, American Lutheran Church, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America guidance on weapons and violence. And I hope to have discussion, and I hope we can realize the importance of relationships in discussing what can be done to improve the situation. It actually boils back to our culture and then our individual responses to people closest to us within our realm of influence, and hopefully we can make changes and improve things. So, how is the video? Is it loading? Oh, good, very good. So, is there a problem with violence in the schools? Mass shootings in America are a serious problem. I did have a web page, Mass Shooting Tracker, that I did have a link to. We're not going to look at it now, but it shows the number of mass shootings, and that's defined as a shooting where there are 4 or more people shot or injured. And the numbers are really big. I'm not going to bother you with numbers now, but Mass Shooter Tracker, if you search for that and want to pursue that, it's really quite incredible. It's got many incidents that never found their way into the news reports, but there are lots of them listed on there. In Wisconsin, not too long ago, in April of this year, there was some plans to have a mass shooting, and he had a shotgun, a map, and a code for his friends. And then the question was what stopped the potential Wisconsin shooter from happening, and it was friends. Kentucky High School, 2 days after a shooting in Kentucky, the people came forward and indicated that they had heard about these plans, and then the police were able to come forward and prevent that from happening. So it's really important that if we see something, we need to say something. Talk about it. If there's something that just doesn't make you feel comfortable, you should definitely talk about it. Active shooter responses. When you entered this room this morning, or whenever you've entered this room, however many times, have you realized how many exits there are from this place? I'll tell you right now, there is no exit back here, but if somebody came in here and started shooting, what would your first response be? Well, hopefully it would be to flee. There's an exit there, and there's an exit there. And there are 6 doors out there, plus through the kitchenette. And so I think just knowing where the exits are, being aware of how to get out, is a real critical element. And hopefully, that'll never happen again. The safety and security of Grace Lutheran employees, members, and visitors is very important to us. We provide guidance on active shooter response right now, and the school shooting in May 18th was not far from Houston, Texas, is a reminder that this type of tragedy can happen anywhere. 10 people were killed and 13 others were wounded. Active shooter incidents are violent, tragic, unpredictable events with devastating consequences. 98% of active shooter incidents are carried out by a single attacker. Attacks may be completely random. Often they are completely random. Most incidents are over before emergency personnel arrive, and that's something that I guess I can't emphasize enough, that if we think calling 911 is going to be instant response, we're probably going to find ourselves very disappointed and waiting for 5 or 10 minutes or more. In Grand Rapids, I work at Mid-State Technical College. If we call 911, it's going to be probably 10 minutes before somebody arrives. They're a very small department, and they respond as quickly as they can, but they have a large area. So most incidents of violence are over before emergency personnel arrive. If you see something suspicious, talk about it with someone. Do not be passive, but act quickly and decisively. You must use your best judgment. Follow the advice given below. And then the first one is to evacuate. Evacuate the facility if it's safe to do so. That's a judgment call. You use your best judgment. Actually, the best advice is to leave, flee, to get out. Nobody has been killed by fleeing an active shooter. They've been wounded, but they haven't been killed. Whereas if you hide, the chances are pretty good. If you just stayed in here and ducked behind chairs, that active shooter is in control, and he or she can easily come and find you and shoot you if they decide to do that. Call 911 from a safe location. Do not assume someone else has called 911. Provide factual information and exact location. If you cannot evacuate, you should hide. If evacuation is not possible, hide in a secure area, preferably in a designated shelter location, possibly the office. However, when there are windows in a door, those windows can be shot out and reach through and unlock that door very easily. So if you were to go into the office, I would proceed into Joanne's office and try and get through the window, get out of the building. You can try to lock the door, blockade the door with heavy furniture, cover all windows, shut off the lights, silence any electronic devices, get down and remain silent. All good advice, but a lot of things to remember if you're feeling really nervous. And if you cannot evacuate and if you cannot hide, then you need to take action. And this is the only advice that can be given. If neither evacuating the facility nor hiding is possible, attempt to disrupt or incapacitate the active shooter by throwing things, yelling, using physical aggressive force. That means attack or swarm. Go after the person. I know that sounds bizarre, but that would be the time where adrenaline would pick in. It's either you or that person, and at that point I would encourage somebody to try and rush and grab the weapon. And somebody's probably going to get hurt, but it's better than killing everybody in that room. There may be no other option. You call 911 as soon as possible, as soon as it is safe to do so. Respond appropriately when law enforcement arrives. On scene, follow instructions, remain calm. Easy to say, not easy to do. Keep your hands empty and visible at all times, and avoid making sudden or alarming movements. So any thoughts or questions? I want it to be a discussion. I don't want to just present all the information, but I would like to watch that 6-minute video. I think we have time for it, and he says it's loaded, so we're going to watch it. It's from the Ohio State University, 6 minutes, run, hide, fight. It's approved, and it's very well done. Go ahead, please.
In regards to active shooter, and I'd like to broaden it just a little bit, because this is not just a school topic too. This is something this is community violence anywhere that you go. If you try to plan, well, where is it going to happen or where is it likely to happen? If you leave your house, that should be a consideration anywhere you end up being. This could be at a shopping place, a place of worship. This could be at a school. It could be at work. It could be at any different type of place. Something like this could come up. We do a lot of training in the schools, and the schools obviously get a lot of attention for this because it is a location where we see a lot of media attention in the schools coming across the board for this. The Wisconsin Rapids School District, familiar with their training programs, they train what's called the ALICE program, which is a just different version of the run, hide, fight, or the alert, which is the one that the sheriff's department we train different places around the county. Just to kind of talk about what the run, hide, fight is, really we've been preparing for different, I would say, catastrophic events that occur all the time, whether that be training in schools for fire alarms, for tornado drills, for all kinds of different things that are natural disasters that kind of come across. And recently, we've been starting to train and working on teaching people how to respond to an active shooter or an active threat of violence, and giving them some tools to think about. And really what a lot of this is having the mental preparation for the response to something like this, and having the acronym or something to stand by as to what you should do. Mental preparation and just thinking about what you would do if you were to respond, or how you might react to a situation like this, is that first step in preparing yourself. So the run, hide, fight acronym is a good one for that. So essentially, run is what it is. The first thing that instinctually that you want to be able to do or be thinking about is to leave that situation. We have some natural reactions that our body is going to do: fight or flight. Okay, those are going to be the two things that we're naturally, instinctually going to do in a stressful situation where we're confronted with an immediate act of violence. Somebody comes in with a weapon and begins shooting or something to that effect. Those two natural reactions, we want one of those two things to happen. Priority is going to be to flee, is the first thing we want to do. If we have an opportunity to leave, that is the first choice. The one other thing I didn't mention that you might do is you might panic or just freeze. We don't want that. That's the least desirable option, okay? So if you don't think about it ahead of time, you don't plan what you might do, that's probably what's going to happen. Versus if you think about it ahead of time and you mentally prepare yourself for what you might do if you're confronted with that type of situation, you're going to know, okay, I know I need to either leave or I need to defend myself here. So first priority is, if you can get out, run, that's the first thing you should do. Try to evacuate the area, get yourself out of that situation. It's not a situation where you want to worry about a bunch of other people, because if you got to stop to help a bunch of other people, then you're slowing them down, you're slowing yourself down, there's going to be a lot more congestion. Everyone needs to have the mentality of we all need to leave. Everybody has to leave and get out of that situation. Now, the run, hide, fight. So in a school setting or any setting where you have an area where you're all congested, or there's maybe multiple rooms, and we talk about this with active shooters in schools, is the lockdown and barricade. So that's going to be the hide. I'm not a big fan of this option. It's an option if there's no other way, if you can't escape, and this is something where you cannot get out of that situation by fleeing, where maybe you're in a room and the perpetrator with a weapon is right outside that door, just down the hallway, and you feel if you're going to enter that person, you're going to actually elevate yourself into the situation. If you try to run, you're going to want to evaluate those exits. And when we talk about running, these doors aren't necessarily the only ways out of this room. The windows can be broken, and there's things that you can do to get out of the area. So you got to look at all possibilities that might be out there. There's a really good video online that illustrates something different. It's actually a fire. It was the Florida nightclub fire. I don't know if anybody's remembered when that happened. There's actually a really good video on it that pertains to just response and mental awareness of your exits. And I don't want to say how many people died in that fire, but there were several. Nightclub, basically, fire goes up by the band, everybody's trying to get out. Where did everybody go? To the front door, where they all remembered coming into the building. But there were numerous other exits that no one at all went to. The front door got completely congested. They couldn't get out. The smoke started getting into the area. Everybody kind of got caught up in a funnel right at that front door. Well, right where that front door was a line of like 30 or 40 yards of just windows. Nobody broke the windows. Nobody got anything out that way. So being aware of your surroundings, really when it comes into the escaping and the running part of it is really important. As far as the hiding or the barricading, if that's the only option you have is to lock yourself down or barricade yourself, we don't want you just to hide. We want you to hide and also look at barricading or creating additional obstacles that you can do to try to protect yourself or prevent that person from getting into the area. I look at when I went to high school, I'm a graduate of Lincoln, and we did some lockdown drills back and when I was in high school, and that was basically we just lock the door and we'd all gather into the corner of a room or maybe into a closet or something like that to basically kind of hide, but we're all congregated in one area. So if you're with a big group of people and you lock the door and then you go all into a corner, now if the active shooter or the threat were to break through that door, which would be very easy, basically they got 15, 20 targets that are all sitting in one common area, that are all huddled together, hidden together in a room or a closet or an area like that. We're looking for separation. We're looking for not only hiding, but not making all one big target. If it's just you, making sure that you're maybe stacking stuff up against the door. So barricading that door, pushing file cabinets, anything you can possibly come across up to that door. This is stuff that the schools are training, when they're doing drills and things like this, and training the staff on how to prepare for these things as well. And that's kind of the barricade portion. That's it, that worst case scenario. And I believe that if you're going to get into a barricade situation, you barricade as much as you possibly can, and then you still keep looking for exits. You got to figure out your way out of that situation as much as possible. And the third one is the fight. This is that other natural reaction. Save this for if all else fails, you can't run, you can't hide, and now you're confronted with the attacker or the shooter, that there you are, you're in this situation, there's nothing you can do to get out of it. Don't just sit there and become a victim. Fight. Do whatever you can possibly do. There's weapons all over, everywhere you go. I mean, everybody thinks you have to have a knife, you have to have a gun, you have to have something like that. No, this microphone can be thrown at someone to create dysfunction, chairs, you name it, is all types of different things. And if worst case scenario, fisticuffs. Moving targets are much harder to hit than a stationary target. So movements, distractions. I could get into a whole thing about their mental brain and their OODA loop. When somebody's going to engage a target, they actually have to go through a mental process called an OODA loop process, where they have to orient, engage, and make the decision to actually carry out that action. And the more distractions that you have coming at that person and that individual, the harder it is for them to overcome that, especially if they haven't trained or prepared themselves to do that. And people that are doing this are not mentally preparing themselves enough to be able to carry out that type of activity. So creating that dysfunction and things like that is all stuff that you can do. So that's kind of the run, hide, fight concept. I don't know, Dick, if I'm covering that. The video, I know I've seen a lot of videos on it. There's some really good stuff out there, and I'm sure this video is probably much better than the little disclaimer that I'm giving you here on this. But that's kind of what that would be.
That's fine. Yeah, very good.
So, does anybody have any questions about that part of it, or Dick, did you have anything else you want to cover in regards to that?
You can just go ahead and talk about laws that that pertain.
Okay, so as far as, I don't know, and I know some of you know who I am. I don't even think I introduced myself when I got up here, but my name is Andrew Simon. I'm a member here at Grace, and I also am investigator sergeant with the Wood County Sheriff's Department. So I investigate crimes and stuff like that all over Wood County area. As well. So I do quite a bit of training on this in the community. We do training where we do PowerPoints and things and put together the ALICE training and the run, hide, fight and the avoid, deny, defend stuff, and it's all kind of the same thing. As far as laws go, Dick asked that I kind of cover laws in regards to weapons in schools and laws that are pertaining to it. Right now, the state of Wisconsin pretty much has got a zero tolerance to any weapons at all whatsoever on school grounds. So it's a felony to possess any type of firearm or anything like that on a school ground unless you're a law enforcement officer. So that is the only people that are allowed to carry a firearm on school grounds. If you have a concealed carry permit, you can possess a firearm, but you have to be 1,000 feet from school grounds. So that's the law as it sits at this time. So pretty clear on that. There's not a whole lot of gray area. It's just law enforcement officers should be the only people that should be able to possess legally a weapon in a school setting. That's where we're at with that. So not a lot to talk about in regards to that. Does anybody have any questions at all in regards to that? Yeah.
So 8,000 feet that's over a mile. Oh, you said 1,000. I thought you said 8,000.
Yeah, 1,000 feet. Yeah. That's what the statute reads.
Okay.
Now, if you're in your vehicle and you're driving by, say, Lincoln High School, and you have nothing to do with the school grounds, that's not going to be an issue. What it boils down to is possession inside or on school grounds is where you're going to run into the problem. Mm-hmm.
This isn't a legal question, but I know a lot of schools are doing a lot with, security for the building and having a simple point of entry, and they're having, you have to ring to come into the school, and they're reducing the amount of adults that can come in and walk. I mean, there's a lot of things in play, but for a church, setting, are there things that people are other churches doing to kind of minimize the threat? And you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess my thought is there's really no way to stop who comes in and out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
are there other churches that have new ideas about this that would protect that congregation setting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as far as the schools go, I'll cover that first because you initially mentioned about schools. For those of you that don't know, absolutely, schools are doing a lot to change their policies and procedures to try to prevent somebody from coming in or entering the schools. They're doing everything outside of essentially wanting everybody with a metal detector as they walk through the door. But as soon as that school day starts, after the students have come in, and pretty much it's free reign. Everybody can come in as they're coming in throughout the day. The doors are unlocked. They're coming into the classes. As soon as that school day starts, then the doors are locked, and then they have to come and they have to press a button and talk to somebody from the staff in the office to get into the school and things like that. It helps keeping people from coming and going in and out of the school. Does it really stop the problem if somebody were to come in the morning? Not really, and that's the thing. A lot of it is just being really vigilant about watching what's going on, looking for strange behaviors, and trying to look at the early warning signs of someone that might do something like this. Or as soon as that person starts to carry out an action, we get it reported right away. There's a lot of law enforcement that is in and around the schools, especially during those times. And we do that obviously to prevent or be there to react to a situation should it erupt. Yes, Dave.
I know there are some churches that are arming ushers that actually have weapons. The ushers can have a weapon and be during the worship service, which I'm not in agreement with, but some churches are doing that today. So I know that's one thing that's happened.
And I've not heard of anything, and my next response to that was I've not really heard of anything that churches are doing, and the issue with it is churches are open for people to come in and worship, and to restrict those type of things could be problematic to our mission as well. But I've not heard of a whole lot. I think the big key thing is education, and just all of us being aware of what we can do to watch for warning signs or things that are concerning. Now, if you see something that concerns you when you come in, maybe an individual that you may think has a weapon, or you see something strange or odd that you feel is an issue, the biggest, most important thing I can stress to you is just report it to somebody so we can look into it. And, let pastor know or let one of the ushers know so we can respond to it accordingly and try to make sure that there isn't an unsafe situation that's present. So we all got to be really watching what's going on. Yeah.
So at Lincoln, when we practiced the code red, I have some friends and I know some people who were stuck in the bathrooms during the code red. So what do you want us to do in that situation if it were a real code red and you were stuck in the bathroom and you don't really have much to defend yourself?
I would still looking at trying to, the question was if you didn't hear, if she's a Lincoln student, she's stuck in the bathroom during what would be a code red or a lockdown procedure where in a real situation, what would be the thing to do is still try to get out. I don't think a bathroom is a real safe place. If that shooter is immediately outside the door, obviously you're going to want to stay in there. You're going to want to minimize your appearance that you're even there, so that if that person even opens the door, they don't even know anybody's even in there. Most of the time, in most situations, they are looking for the most targets. They're looking for the congregated areas. They're going for maybe a specific target they're looking for. They're not going to be searching or taking a lot of time to search a bathroom that doesn't appear there's anybody in there. But if you can get out of that bathroom and maybe there's an exit right down the hallway, you have to move somewhat tactfully and just open the door, look, all right, we clear that area. The person isn't there. Maybe you hear some gunfire down the hallway a ways and you know that, all right, they're down there right now. Well, then you get out of there. And, that's the same for rooms. We tell staff that if you hear gunfire on the other end of the building, there's no reason why they shouldn't be emptying their classrooms and getting into the nearest exit and having them just get off the property and just leave and reconvening at another location somewhere else just to get out of that area. The thing we want to try to avoid people doing is just all locking down and just staying there. We want to get the people that can be evacuated, and then the areas that the threat is, where the shooter is, those are the areas that those people should be, if they're close to the area, locking down, barricading, making themselves as hard of a target as possible. And then if they're right confronted with a situation, fighting, trying to disarm the person, they're naturally going to think that they have 100% full control of the situation because they have the weapon. And as soon as they're given a situation where they're given some resistance to that, and someone starts fighting back to them, it's going to slow their, what I refer to as their OODA loop down significantly. It's going to make them really slow down. They're not going to be moving real fast at that point. They're going to have to orient and get through those obstacles, and the more resistance they get, the harder it's going to be for them to carry out what actions they want to carry out.
I'm interested to know what you think about having teachers armed.
So the question is just my opinions on having teachers armed. It's a gray area. I'm not going to say that I'm in favor or I'm against it. I'm definitely open to that possibility. But I think I would never want to force someone to carry a weapon that doesn't want to. And then we're looking at introducing weapons into those areas. Do we really want to do that or not? And there's nothing to say that unfortunately teachers couldn't be a threat also. So it's hard to really draw that line. I don't mean to divert that question, but I don't really know that. I guess I'm open for discussion on that. I'm not going to say I would disagree to it, but my answer is somewhat political in terms of I think there's some pros, I think there's some cons to it, and I'm not going to say that's going to solve the problem.
Well, can I just interject here? One thing that really concerns me is if I'm a teacher and I've got a weapon and something happens and I draw my weapon and I start trying to address the situation, am I going to get shot by the first police officer that comes in because he sees a weapon? And especially if I'm a black guy in a school, in a classroom with a weapon, I'm probably going to be the first person shot. So personally, I think the liability of having, and I'm interested to know what any teachers in the room think about it, but tell me, yeah.
I will tell you that I work at elementary school with lots of kids, including kids with disabilities, emotional disabilities, and we've had police officers that have had to come to our school to help with situations, and kids will talk about, oh, I know how to remove that safety on that person's gun. I mean, they know me with a gun. I just feel like having a gun in the school when it's not an active shooter situation could be very dangerous if kids know which teachers have them and where they are, and it just seems like I'm not against guns in schools by safety officials, but putting a teacher in that situation, like hire more people to be in the school with a gun if that's what you want to do, but that maybe not a teacher who's already got 112 responsibilities in that moment for all their children, their students, and adding that adrenaline on top of that to have the responsibility of that weapon. And I feel, because I'm an educator, my husband's, and then we're both in the school district, and he would be one that would feel compelled, like maybe I should have it because I'm trained in a marksman, and I'm trained maybe I should be the one to save kids. But then what if he shoots a kid that's not, and hurts somebody and kills somebody that's not in the line of the chaos? And how can we live with that? I guess that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point in terms of the security of the weapon and things like that. That's a big thing. And you bring a weapon into a school, it's not secured, or teachers, we don't train them to walk around with guns every day. Working in law enforcement, I have to show up with a gun every day at work. Otherwise, if I come to work without my gun, I'm getting told I got to go home. That's a tool for my job that I am required to carry every day. And we spend a lot of training, we spend a lot of time We devote a better part of our career learning how to maintain the safety of that weapon and make sure that that is controlled as we're walking around in the community with it every single day. There's a lot that goes into that, and that's very important, and that's a huge role in our training and the time that we spend. And if you start taking time to teach people to do those things, they're going to be taking time away from teaching the core topics of what they need to be doing. And I do think that's a risk. Law enforcement, I think we do a good job reacting to these situations when we get there. I think having law enforcement officers present in the schools, and I'm not saying that we need to have all these law enforcement officers that we hire to be in schools. I think we use the resources we have, and during the times where students are moving to and from, during the times when they're coming in and out of school, during the times when opportunities exist for these things to take place more significantly, there's a heavier law enforcement presence. So, and providing the patrol and being there to react to that situation much, much faster if it happens. It's also shown that if we're there and they think we're going to react to it quicker, they won't do it because they won't be successful. And they do not usually, Dick made the comment that these situations end before law enforcement arrives. Usually it's when we're arriving, and in a lot of cases they commit suicide because they do not want to have a confrontation with law enforcement. So that's, in a lot of the school shootings, that's what traditionally the outcome normally is. I'm not going to say in every one, but statistically, if we pull up the graph, it's going to show that that's usually what happens.
Any other questions? Yes, Susan.
If the entry doors are set up to detect metal, how can the perpetrator get in? Or is it possible for them to still get in?
Well, we don't have metal detectors anywhere around here that people are going through. What that would require would be essentially like you're going through essentially a airport security gate every time you'd enter into a school. If we were to develop that type of program, and everybody would have to empty their pockets, everybody would have to go through a scanning machine, all those type of things to do that. And we just don't have those resources, so it's not really something that none of the schools around here have anything in our area set up for that.
Andrew, you mentioned knowing your exits. We had somebody from the sheriff's department come to my work and talk about that. We saw the fire video. If anybody gets a chance to go online and look it up, it's so sad. But so that person told us, when you walk in a room, just automatically start looking around for your exits, and that has stuck with me ever since I heard that. I go to the movie theater and it's like, all right, let's set in the middle because there's a back door there and a back door there. And even sitting in church, like you said, these windows are exits for us. We shouldn't think that they're not. Maybe we need to grab something to break them, but we need to be aware of our surroundings. I think is the most important thing, and is just to visually, we don't ever want to encounter anything like this.
Absolutely.
It's coming closer, right? It's in our state. It's happening in our state, and again, I'm the exit person. I'm looking for the way out if I can find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's exactly, you pretty much hit the nail right on the head. If there's one message that you really want to, take away from this is just thinking about mentally preparing yourself and, your family and things to have these discussions, talk about these things, and what would you do in this particular situation. Law enforcement and the military, that's all we do. Everything we do is mental preparation and preparing and training. And when we do, and we train and we prepare and we get ready for how would we react to this situation, if we've thought about it and we've planned how we're going to react to it, when we get there and when we're encountered with that, we're going to react as we've prepared. And that's a lot of what it boils down to. I used to, when I was working night shift as a deputy sheriff, driving around going to calls, if I was going to a disturbance, I have some facts about that disturbance as I'm on my way there. I would actually run through some scenarios in my head as to, okay, well, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And then as I'm pulling in, as those things are starting to develop, I don't even really need to think about, again, what I'm going to do. That decision has already kind of been made because I've already planned out in my mind how I'm going to react to it. And I can react to that situation much more effectively because I've already mentally prepared for it. And a lot of it is just walking around, and when you walk into a building, looking around, okay, well, there's exits there. I know where they're at. There's different things you could use use as weapons potentially, various things like that around you. And that's just mentally preparing for, what you might need to do. It's that first step. It's going to probably prevent you from freezing, locking up, and going, all right, now I need to think about this, and I'm under stress, and your system is going to be significantly slowed down because of all the load that you have coming in from all the stress responses. You may not be able to make a decision very fast, and the decision that you make might be very unclear, might not be a good decision because you're not reacting appropriately. So just really mentally preparing yourself, thinking about things ahead of time, just walking through it and having discussions with your family and your friends about these things and talking about it. And if we can get the people as a whole to do that, that's going to help society as a whole combat these things. Yep.
I think it's good to talk about that because I think the media outside of obviously arming people with guns, the media's biggest mindset is to, particularly with the schools, is for the high. And I think you focus in on getting out more. So, my wife is a teacher and she's, talked about she's very emotional about this whole high thing. But, the media's big on, they talk about like the things they have out to lock the doors, to hide them out, stuff like that. Hide the corners. But, I think that's another, talking more about your surroundings. I mean, we talk about it with our daughter all the time. A couple of rules I have with her, but not so much about shooting, but just being in general, not one of those things. I guess the question I would have is, just particularly for a school, is really one resource officer enough for Lincoln? I mean, for the community here.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I think the more the better as far as we can get law enforcement around the schools as a proactive approach. When it comes to the media, I wish the media would be doing more where they would be educating people about what to do in these situations and not necessarily glorifying the people that are doing these acts. I will say, and it's my own personal opinion, that I believe the reasons why active shooter incidents and community violence is as bad as it is around our country is because of the media. I think they have some stake in the game in terms of glorifying some of the individuals that do it. A lot of the individuals that carry these acts out are not people that will be glorified in the media for anything else in their lives. So this is something they will get that from. And they don't know the difference between something positive or something negative. They can make the news nationally. They could care less if it's positive or negative. They made the news. They've made themselves famous at that point. And the more we publicize these incidents taking place and the more glorification they get in the media, I think the bigger problem they become. So it's my own opinion there.
I have a question. My employment is such that I am, you may as well say, in the classroom with 3 to 5-year-olds, 17 to 20 of them. We've never, our organization, unless I missed the memo, we've never been spoke to about what to do. Now, our rooms will all have pretty glass windows, and to hide different corners. But these are 3 to 5-year-olds that are, for lack of better terms, not such good home lives anyway. How do you get these children? How do I now, as bringing this topic up, and I will bring it up tomorrow at the all-day work meeting. How do you get these 3 to 5-year-olds? One, maybe to be quiet because there is a disgruntled parent that's in the hallway, or grandparent, or auntie, or whoever. What should I do as an employee working with these little people?
That's tough. We all know it's hard sometimes to do that, and I think your skills as a teacher in communicating with them and making a learning environment fun for them to learn about something like this and learn that if a bad person comes in, maybe what to do, and teaching those fundamentals of, we're going to do this, now we're going to run, or we're going to hide, we're going to fight, those things, and breaking it down on the real basic fundamentals with them and making that an exercise as part of a teaching tool. I think that would be the best way to do it, in my opinion. We've seen that happen. I know the ALICE program has got some very good stuff when it comes. The Wisconsin Rapids School District uses that, and they do some really good stuff with the younger folks and the young kids in terms of making learning about reacting to these acts of violence almost just like a training protocol somewhat somewhat elementary. So that does work, and I hope I answered your question. I mean, working with your the staff as well that you have as far as putting and implementing a plan together, I think it's important. Initially, it sounds like they don't have anything in place or any training in place on this right now, and that's something that definitely I would bring up to them in terms of, hey, you know, we had gotten some. They talked with us at our church, and you know, if they want to reach out, if they're in Wood County, they can feel free to reach out to the sheriff's department. We'd be happy to come and do some training on it and work through those things. We enjoy doing that, and if we could do a training to everybody in our community, we'd be happy to do it. So I hope I answered your question.
Is there a requirement, a state requirement to provide guidance to schools?
There's not any requirements or anything as far as the law goes, but it's something that we obviously are very passionate about, and I know that our department if we get any requests, there's not a request that would ever get denied for us to hold any type of training or presentation on active shooter response or anything, whether that be in a church, a workplace, or anywhere. We would be more than happy to do any type of training. That will never turn anybody down on that.
Any other questions or comments?
We had a gentleman who was a retired veteran coming into our school one day a week, and he would just sit at the door and he would talk to the kids, and I would send kids to him to read and things like that. And it felt good having him in our school. Have there been any thoughts about having maybe National Guard or retired veterans or anything like that coming into schools just to provide that presence and provide a positive role model for the kids that are there too?
There's nothing that I've heard of, but it's a great idea. I think anything that we can do like that would definitely be helpful.
One comment I want to make, I was with the Wood County Literacy Council, and everybody who offers, let me get
Yep.
back up here, I'm sorry.
Everybody who is a tutor gets a background check. Because as nice as this guy might look, you don't know where he's coming from or what his intentions are. So I think anybody that works with kids really must have a background check to clear him or her to work with the kids. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Any other questions? I really appreciate you, Andy. Thank you very much for coming.
Of course, and just if anybody has any questions, you know, you have one. I mean, I'm around here. Feel free to ask me or give me a call or reach out to me in any way, and I'll help. Or if you know an organization that you want us to do a presentation for, you can reach out to me, and I will make sure that we facilitate that.
Thank you. And Barb, I will give this to you when I'm done with it today, so you can take this on. So then, Pastor Michelle, would you be willing to provide us with some information about guidance, ELCA, guidance on weapons and violence? Thank you very much.
Our national church body has a website, and if you're not familiar with it, it's elca.org, and there's tons of information in all different kinds of areas in there. And so I just real quick, because I didn't off the top of my head know what we had for resources in this area, so I just went to the website and searched gun violence, and there's half a dozen pages worth of information there, at least. So I pulled a couple of things that I think might be helpful or most relevant for us. I did make a handful of copies of these. I'm not sure how many people wanted to do, extra reading, so we can make more copies if needed. But we do, part of what we do as a national church is that we do advocacy work, and I think this is one of the areas that we're maybe not so aware of. And so we are working on a national level for or against certain kinds of legislation, depending on how they fit with our confession of faith as the ELCA. And so that's something to be aware of. From 2006, we have a gun violence prevention social policy resolution from the church-wide assembly not 2006, this is 2016, sorry. From our most recent church-wide assembly, and I'm not going to read it all to you. It's very legalese because that's how these things have to be worded. but it reaffirms our commitment to addressing issues of violence in society through worship, education, service, advocacy, and so on. Reaffirms that ELCA's social policy does not reject gun ownership or recreational activities associated with guns as being morally wrong, but encourages church leadership to communicate with Congress and state legislators our support for managing gun purchases, background checks, and so forth. Also, in the same, in a similar vein, for legislation to, let me think. This church's sense of urgency for the renewal or replacement of the federal assault weapons ban. So that would say that the ELCA as a church supports a ban on assault weapons. Doesn't give, I know there's lots of details that go into that, but that's as a general stance. There's letters from the bishop, pastoral letters about violence and gun violence in our culture, and speaking to how that impacts everybody, whether you've been personally impacted or not. There's an official message on community violence, which isn't just about gun violence, but covers violence in a broader sense and how it impacts our lives and churches and communities. And what else did I put in the packet? And there's a really good article written by an ELCA pastor. This is in 2015, after one of the too many incidents of gun violence, that has kind of some myths and facts that I thought was well done. And there's a piece on what churches can do from the Living Lutheran, which is our national church magazine. Just real quick, it came up earlier, and I wasn't quick enough to jump up. The question about what are churches doing and what have churches done. This is not official. This is just what I know from talking with other pastors. So this is limited in scope. And a lot of it is education, like it's already been talked about, and helping people to be aware and to pay attention and to train, so to speak. Train's maybe not the best word, but to talk about how we all have a responsibility to be the greeters on Sunday morning, not just whoever's officially doing that or whoever's officially ushering, but that's something that we can all be doing, and welcoming people and engaging them in conversation, especially when it's somebody you don't know, and to figure out, encouraging us to get over the fear of offending somebody who's been a founding member of the church because you don't know them. And so, which I think that's what I always hear when I say greet people and talk to people you don't know. It's, well, what if they've been here forever and I don't know them, and then that embarrasses them and embarrasses me? I'm like, we got to get over that. We really do. Yeah, so, and there's ways to do that, and we'll be looking at some of that hospitality stuff. So things like, instead of asking, are you new here, or is this your first time here at Grace, which is, where you can potentially stick your foot in it, say, I don't think we've met. That's a lot safer. That's usually my line when there's folks, because they've probably been here at Christmas and Easter, and I didn't recognize them because there's crowds then. To say, I don't think we've met. I'm, Pastor Michelle, and you can engage in conversation that way. Other things churches are doing is paying attention to the number of doors that are unlocked and unattended. This is a big building, and and that's something to just be aware of, is how many doors do we have unlocked, and do they all need to be unlocked, and that kind of thing. Keeping track of keys and who has keys, that's not going to happen here at Grace, but it's highly recommended, and often, or switching to combination locks on the doors and only giving people who absolutely need it the combination, and you can give temporary access through setting up temporary passwords for some of those kinds of locks. Some churches post very prominently, no weapons on the property. There's like official language and signage for that you could do. Background checks for people who work regularly with youth, that is something that we do try to do. Honestly, I'm most aware and uneasy during the week. It's not Sunday morning that scares me because there's lots of people around. But when I'm here after dark by myself, this is a big building. And if I'm not expecting anybody, I lock the doors. If I'm expecting somebody to come, I leave this door open. The way my office windows face, I can't see who's coming and going. Susan can't see who's coming and going because the office is too far from the doors. So that's one place where a lot of churches have, and depending on their location, especially inner city churches, unfortunately, have switched to having a camera and a buzzer, and they keep the doors locked during the week. And then whoever is in the office has access to an intercom and a view of the camera. And often has, I think it's some kind of a magnetic lock that they can hit a button and it can release from the office if it's somebody that they know and can trust to come in.
Isn't that kind of defeating the purpose of the church?
Well, maybe, yeah.
Well, it is. Because you're supposed to welcome all. Now,
We are.
The Baptist churches were locking their doors now. The one in my neighborhood did when I was growing up because it kept me dry.
Sure.
People going in and violating things.
Sure. So, and that's a good question. Where is the balance between being the house of God that is open and available for all people, and keeping our staff and folks who are on the property safe? And I don't have a magic answer or a perfect answer for that.
Anybody. Say you're scared.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's a good question. The days where churches were left open and unlocked 24/7 are long over. And there's a balance. If somebody comes in wanting money, I hate to tell you this, I'll give them the offering if they come in wanting money. But that doesn't worry me as much as somebody, coming in with a weapon or, other intentions. But other questions or comments for me as pastor? John?
With the threat of that, with the secretary or yourself, are you keeping the doors locked during the day?
No. During the day, we do keep these doors right here outside the worship space unlocked. So, and again, if I'm in the building alone, especially at night, and not expecting anybody for a meeting or something, I will lock the doors. But during regular office hours, they are open. Sometimes there's more than one of us in the building, sometimes not. Susan gets here pretty early in the morning, and she's often here for an hour or more alone. And then with Kevin and Joanne and myself, our schedules flex and vary, and so sometimes all of us are here, sometimes one of us is here. So,
How does she or the church go about that?
I am not sure that I've ever asked Susan if she's uncomfortable with the door being open. We haven't had any incidents in the year and a third or so I've been here. We don't tend to get too many people just walking in who aren't already connected to the church. We tend to get more phone calls for people looking for money and different things than we get people walking in. Anything else? All right, thank you.
So we need to close, but I want to make sure that I mention Jennifer pointed out to me a video on bullying. How to build a bully from scratch. It's a 10-minute video on YouTube, very well worth watching, And it shows the importance of relationships. Very, very critical element to the whole issue of our culture. And we can help change our culture by being people that we, would hope to aspire for our children to be also, to be good to them. Article in the Living Lutheran this month, the commitment to peace is in a challenging age. That is for sure. So thank you very much. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So in all things, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Some very basic information that we've all heard all our lives, and it's something we need to practice in our daily life. So any other thoughts or comments? I hope this was helpful. It's been maybe more presentation than discussion, but I appreciate everybody's being here and whatever discussion we've had.
I'll leave, I've got a half dozen or so copies of the ELCA materials that I talked about. I'll leave them in the Welcome Center if anybody's interested, or you can go to the website yourself. And this just kind of curates the website for you so you don't have to go through all 6 pages of stuff.
Very good. Thank you very much.